By the age of 5, I learned that I was undocumented. My status had been so ingrained in my childhood that it was a common topic of conversation. My father often recounted my family's long journey from El Salvador to the United States. We would be sitting at the dinner table and he would begin to explain how at age 4, I walked across the desert, how he carried my 2-year-old brother on his back throughout the grueling journey, and how he and my mother left their lives and all that they knew behind in our country. His recount was always punctuated with the promises of what I could achieve in America. Though then, I did not understand that what being undocumented meant. I was naive about how my status would ultimately impact every aspect of my life. All I knew was that I was enraged every time my parents refused to travel to SeaWorld San Diego, despite my persistence. It was later revealed that my father's reluctance to take long trips was due to his fear of being stopped by the police. My family's status also impacted their career paths and stifled their ambitions. My mother worked as a cook and my father worked in construction because they did not obtain the appropriate documentation to have higher paying jobs or pursue their own goals. However, it was not until the summer of my junior year in high school that the implications of my status affected me directly in the course of my own pursuits. I was getting ready to apply to college and felt a great sense of excitement. I was finally on the way to achieve the success that my parents assured I would receive. The feelings of eagerness and enthusiasm were soon replaced by anger and confusion when I revealed that I was undocumented to my college counselor. I learned then that I did not qualify for federal financial aid. I also realized that my hopes of attending a college outside of California were slim because many scholarship programs required U.S. citizenship. As a high-achieving student, I felt like my world had been turned upside down. I was going to be denied the opportunity for higher education simply because of my status. Anger infiltrated my body. I could not help but think that this was all unfair. That fall, my father learned about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA program. Admittedly, I did not know much about DACA, but obtaining deferred action brought a sense of assurance, excitement, and hope to my life. I felt relief because I no longer feared deportation. I felt excitement because my social security card and work permit would expand my employment opportunities and allow me to be financially stable. But most importantly, I was filled with hope, as I knew that I had the opportunity to attend the college of my choice. Receiving DACA changed my life. Through DACA, I was granted a national scholarship for DACA students. I received a full scholarship to a prestigious institution in Pennsylvania. I was able to travel to and from Los Angeles without fear, as I now possessed a California ID, and I had the opportunity to gain valuable insight and experience from my internships throughout college. Though DACA opened various opportunities that I would have otherwise not been awarded, I know that more must be done to advance the lives of millions of others like me. My undocumented experience has allowed me to empathize with those who seek a better life. I have gained insight into the issues and needs of the immigrant community, which will ultimately help me advocate for new immigration policies. Pursuing a legal career will allow me to bring professional expertise back to my community and will equip me with the skills needed to develop a framework for immigration law. Okay, thoughts on this one? Is it?
Well, I thought he spent too much time about how his mom and dad were affected by not being documented, instead of, I guess, saying personally how did it affect him as a young person. Like, you know, what did he miss out on? I guess the opportunities, and then transitioning into, I guess, how, you know, or the effects of I mean, I guess the effects of not being able to go to SeaWorld and not feeling, I guess, included in general society.
I hear what you mean. Yeah, it's always a concern whenever I hear that in a personal statement, we're hearing somebody else telling a story. So my father recounted this. Yeah, that's a fair point. Would that work in a diversity statement, though?
I guess so, since his mom and dad are both not from here, and he can say that he's different, since his view was altered by his parents' fear, and he stands out based on his experiences, I want to say, and I guess DACA could have been included in diversity statements as well instead of putting in his personal statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just planting the idea. We could come back to it, but it's a thought that I had.
Okay.
Victoria, did you have some thoughts?
For me, it almost feels like the story feels kind of shallow and cold because he's undocumented, yes, but he didn't find out that he was undocumented until he was in high school and he was about to apply. So throughout all his life, he really didn't know the difference. He was living basically a normal life. But until he went to apply to college, that's when he found out. So a big chunk of his life was basically unaffected, and he lived a pretty clear-cut life, but and his parents sort of withheld that from him. So I feel like he has a really good story. I feel like he can talk about something like why his parents decided to travel to America in the first place, and why, and like how hard it is to immigrate into the US when you come from a very poor country, and like the idea of like American dream and how it's only held to certain people. And I feel like he can talk about and advocate towards DACA recipients and how they're treated, and making it the immigration maybe more lenient, or talk about what his criticisms are against how hard it is from people from the Latin American community and like the idea of people from Latin America to come over to the US, and like always being called like undocumented people constantly. You have papers, and like the name calling, and like this little like subtle names people call people that come from there, for example. I feel like he can go off. He maybe has a stronger story because throughout his time he didn't actually know he was undocumented until he was in college. So I feel like there's not enough. He doesn't. It's not as strong enough for him to write about it. Maybe that's my opinion, at least.
No, thank you, Victoria. There's two big things that you mentioned that I want to call attention to. So I thank you for bringing them up. The first is the ending is kind of vague. It's kind of weak. I think it could be a lot stronger. So when I see generalities, develop a framework for immigration law, what does that mean? What specifically do you want to do? Obviously, we know you're calling out particular things like DACA. Show that you've gotten a little bit more exposure to what are some of the particular things in immigration law that you might want to change or might want to develop further. So I'd love to hear more specifics on that. Not that you have to do a ton of legal research, but rather than being vague in general, either get specific or just don't say it at all, period. I would go one of those two directions with it. Then I think the biggest thing, and I'm glad you raised this again, Victoria, was about that moment, summer of junior year of high school. This person mentions they learned by the age of 5 that they were undocumented, but didn't really recognize the implications until much later. So what was that moment like? There's a lot of tension in that to realize what are the actual implications of essentially being a sort of second-class citizen, not having the same rights as everybody else, even though you've been here for quite a long time. What does that look like to, in a way, have the rug pulled out from under you to realize, oh, wait, there's all these things that I can't do that I would have thought would be totally fine. I want to really get to the moment there because to me, there's a ton of tension, a ton of drama, and I imagine some tears maybe. That's huge. So I would want to really get to that moment in time in the story. To me, that's a lot more compelling for this individual than hearing secondhand the parent's story, the father recounting the long journey. I wouldn't start with that. I'd start with the moment in time in high school when you're realizing, oh, wait, can I even go to college? Can I even get financial aid? All my friends are going, why can't I? I thought I was like everybody else. Turns out I'm not. And then the ups and downs with then DACA and saying, okay, well, I actually can go after all. See, I was going to be denied. Anger infiltrated my body. I couldn't think this was all unfair. I want to go deeper on that. To me, that's part of the tension, part of the drama. Focus there, not on the parent's story, not even necessarily on the parents. If you want to do a separate diversity statement about your family background, that's a better place, I think, to show where you came from in terms of being an undocumented immigrant. Maybe focusing there on that, and then focusing specifically on high school to college for the personal statement. And maybe there's other topics that one could talk about too. Or maybe those things could all be in this statement, but with a different framing and a different focus going into, again, keep it personal.
I personally didn't mind the referral to the parents and how he kind of started out the story. I really liked the fact that it was kind of this narrative where we get this build up and now we're somewhat invested because now we know where it comes from and the trials and tribulations. But then I feel like I agree that I feel like they shied away from divulging too much, but I think it was more for the purpose of not crying woe is me. Like I feel like they were just trying to say, well, okay, I had this hardship, but then here's how I overcame it and this is what I learned. So they weren't trying to have a sob story out of it, but it does kind of seem empty in a way because yes, we're getting all these things about DACA, but we know about DACA in general, right? Like we know kind of the big idea about it and what it's supposed to do, but how did that directly affect you? What was it like with your family? Maybe how did you go about it? Like what was the system like? Was it an easy process? Was it hard? Did it go up and down? How quickly did it become accessible to you, and kind of that turnaround for your low and then your elation, right? So what did that look like? That was just my personal opinion, but I feel like they just shied away from it because they didn't want to seem like they were kind of like dragging it out.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's no one right answer on this. This is more of an art than a science. And so, I said one thing, you said a different thing. The author may have a third opinion. And so I would just encourage the author of this statement, play it out in different ways and see what feels right to you. See what feels right to you, but also take into mind, of course, our feedback and consider that as well. But there may be multiple ways to go about this and just figure out what feels best, but consider making some changes. And writing's never done. It's never perfect. It's just further revisions and explorations till you get closer and closer to what feels good to you. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.